It's for real.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Nostalgia Crackdown here on the Let's Get Ready Network. I'm Adelia, that's my buddy Josh, and this month we're talking about one of the more enduring members of the Schmoedown. He was in the very first ever official Schmoedown match. He was the first Star Wars champion. We're talking about Ken Napzok.
Absolutely. There's a lot to talk about with Ken and why we're going to do more episodes about focusing on one player in their careers. And I think what's great to start off with Ken because he was in all aspects of the Schmoedown. He was a player, he was a manager, and he was an announcer. There's very few people who have done both playing, managing, announcing. And so what's going to be how we're going to divide this episode is we're going to talk about his playing career, then his managing career, and then him as an announcer. There's a lot to go on. I'm excited to do it. And he is one of the names that doesn't get talked about a lot, but he is one of the most influential people within the Schmoedown in the history of the Schmoedown.
Absolutely. So let's start off with Ken's playing career.
So with Ken's playing career, what's so interesting is he is a Star Wars champion. He is one of the few people who went into the Schmoedown and became a champion. That's something that we can't take lightly, even if he was the first Star Wars champion. But what's also interesting is he had a lot of impact in influential matches, even though he did not win a lot. In fact, if you look at his record, his total record of Star Wars and singles and teams, I think in total it is 4-12. He has 4 wins and 12 losses. And the fact that he was able to get to basically 16 matches despite not being able to win consistently just shows how entertaining he was in those matches.
Mm-hmm.
Singles, we can kind of breeze by. He's only had 4 singles matches. He won against Katie Sackhoff in the 2014 Ultimate Showdown.
His win against Katie Sackhoff was the very first Schmoedown match, official Schmoedown match ever, and it was his only singles win.
Yes.
In singles competition.
Yes, he then loses to Makuga in the Ultimate Schmoedown. And he plays in the free-for-alls. He loses the JTE in 2017, and then he loses to Matt Nost in 2018. Overall singles, there isn't much to comment on. Those are a lot of those matches where you're like, oh yeah, that did happen. Because and I think you could look back on those matches, go back to those matches and have a good time just because it's almost like watching the match all over again, just because for people like you and me who have watched so many matches that like some get lost to the sands of time. So when you watch it again, it's almost like, oh, I don't remember this. And it's like watching the match again for the very first time. But Napzok always was a great competitor. He'll always make the match entertaining. And the more interesting part of his playing career, or I would argue the most interesting part, is teams. He was a part of the Nerds Watch, which is the most famous team he was a part of. He was Rachel Cushing's first teammate. And that team I thought they had more matches, but they only had 4 matches. They beat Tough Beats. They also beat Team Action, which is something people forget, that they were one of the teams that were able to beat Team Action, early Team Action. But then they lost to Rotten Tomatoes in the number 1 contender match. And then in 2017, bit of a rough draw. They got above the line in the first round, I believe.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, above the line is one of those teams where you just like, as soon as they came into the league, it's like, oh, this is a new teams division. You just like, Ken and Rachel were a very good team and they had a lot of chemistry, but like once above the line came into the league, I think the teams division changed in a way where it's like, oh, you have to be in a different level to compete against above the line. And I think by that time, Nerds Watch has run this course because it's like, oh, okay, it was tough to imagine them going to I think it might have been possible, but it was tough to imagine them ever getting as close to a championship as their initial run. And that led to a great story turn with the Ken Napzok heel turn. as you will.
My favorite storyline, literally my favorite storyline in the history of the Schmoedown, is the end of Nerds Watch, Ken's heel turn and joining the Lion's Den, and the formation of the Shire Wolves coming out of that. That's my favorite storyline.
Absolutely. It's just so jam-packed because you just it's so good in building Ken up as a villain in a way, building the Lion's Den up as this villain faction because they were already the premier villain faction, and then being able to take away Ken and just give that heartbreak to Rachel. And then also, it's the birth of the heroes that are the Fife Club, which we did talk about in a previous episode. So if you want to go watch that, but the birth of the Fife Club and the Shire Wolves, which is there's so much going on story wise, and that's why even though Ken doesn't win a lot, you kind of look back on his matches and they were very influential. A lot of them, especially the Nerds Watch Rise and Fall, you can argue is one of the most influential single team storylines for the history of the Schmoedown, where the rise and fall of the single team really changed the course of Schmoedown history for years to come.
Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to mention two other teams. He was part of the team called Jedi, which I don't remember because it was a 2015 Ultimate Schmoedown. I'm going to quickly look
I
up
think
his
they
name.
played one match.
Yes,
I think they lost in the first round of the first ever teams tournament to
newbie.
Mary Jetikin and Sasha Pearl Raver.
Yes.
So that wasn't a team that lasted very long. I have no memory of that match whatsoever.
No, I'll be honest. I never watched the 2015 season. It's just something that I've just never had interest in or watched, just because as someone who came on a newer fan, it's just the new stuff always hooked me, and the old stuff never felt like the new stuff to me. So I didn't go back and watch it. So I actually have never seen this match. They did. By the way, he did team up with Dagnino, a team called the Lions Den to be Shire Wolf's first match. So again,
That's right.
him being in the history of the rise of the Five Club and the Shire Wolves, and then that was his whole team's career. And you could argue, teams was record wise more successful than any of his other leagues. However, the reason why Star Wars is his most successful is because he was a Star Wars champion. He won the first ever Star Wars. I guess we call it a championship match. I don't think it was called a championship match at the time. It was a 5-way
Yeah, it
between
was the
Jenny.
Fatal Five Way at Star Wars Celebration in 2017, and I remember it being a big deal because Sam Witwer was in it and he lost.
On the final question.
Yeah,
It was I mean it was really crazy because it was so that hey, even was considered one of the most dominant players within the Schmoedown, and even the 5-pointer got him at one point. So a great win by Napzok, and then he's followed up by Whitwer versus Napzok 2, that famous championship match goes down to the buzzers, which Whitwer barely wins. Just an incredible match.
and that was
Napzok,
an Iron Man match, wasn't it?
yeah, that was the Iron Man match, I believe.
Yeah. That last question and answer that Whitwer got in after the buzzer, I remember that being a point of contention for many people and big debates for a long time. Should it have counted? Should it not have counted? I think it should have counted. He got the buzzer in before the time ran out, so he should be allowed to give an answer.
Absolutely.
But yeah, those two matches, the one from Star Wars Celebration and the Iron Man match against Whitwer, are the two Star Wars matches that really stand out to me for Ken.
And like I can say this more about Ken and Star Wars than any other player in a division. I truly believe without Ken Napzok, there's no Star Wars division. I
Yeah.
truly believe that, like, especially with him winning the belt and going and people forget how hard it was to just kind of hang in there against Whitwer, but to go head and toe with Whitwer, take every punch and kind of throw it back. The fact that we don't talk about how impressive it was that he really did come down to the final question. Napzok was
Yeah,
so close to winning that match.
it's one of the more impressive Iron Man matches performances that we saw in the Schmoedown. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about the Patriots and above the line Iron Man match, but I think this match with Whitwer and Napzok is more impressive than that one.
Absolutely. I think most people would agree it's the greatest Iron Man match of all time.
Yeah.
Um, it's what makes people have a love for Iron Man matches and why a lot of people kind of wanted more Iron Man matches as the Schmoedown kind of went on. And I understand why Christian was very hesitant to do Iron Man matches because it's a weird format. It takes away a lot of the game of the Schmoedown, what makes the Schmoedown great. We have a whole episode about how the rules of the Schmoedown is what make it so entertaining and great. And the Iron Man format is so different in that sense where it's just like, hey, it's pure trivia, head to toe, just whoever gets more questions right. And yeah, I mean it's interesting to talk about these two matches, his first two matches, then go on to because he plays three more matches in Star Wars, and all three are losses. If you were to say to someone after that Whitwer versus Napzok match, where it comes down to the final question, yeah, so Napzok's going to play three more times in Star Wars and lose all three times. I don't think anyone would believe them.
I don't think anyone would believe that either. I honestly, until I looked up Ken's records for this show that we're doing tonight,
Yeah.
I really thought Ken had a better record in Star Wars than he has because he was such an ever present in that division in the early years of the division that you just don't realize that he only won the very first match of the division and that's it.
Yeah, it's interesting because like his next match is Damon versus Scrimshaw, which was a three-way number one contender match to try and get back against Whitwer. And
I
what I think,
remember that because that was the live event in Chicago at
yes,
Star Wars Celebration in front of 1,000 people. And I remember watching that live and being really excited watching that match because it's one of the better, more competitive live matches that we saw.
absolutely. I think it was so surprising. I remember when I was watching that match is I think if I remember correctly, that match ended up being between Damon and Scrimshaw.
Yeah, Ken
I think
finished third in that match.
yeah, and it was like, oh, I think that was the match where it's like, oh, this is a turning point in the Star Wars division, we'll see with the rise of Alex Damon. And it's funny because after this match, Damon wins, and if Napzok wins, this would have been a career altering point because he wouldn't have played Whitwer again because Whitwer retires from the Schmoedown after this match. Napzok would have played against, I think was it Bruce?
Bruce
Uh,
Green, I think, was his
yes,
name. He
Bruce
only played the one
Green.
time the Star Wars match where Alex Damon became champion, and it
Yes.
was not a great performance.
There are some
And
championship matches like that. It's Alex Damon and Bruce Green, Shire Wolves with Brienne. Certain matches where the team becomes a champion under somewhat weird circumstances just because of scheduling or a player retiring. You could even make the argument. Oh no, that would be the Shire Wolves. I was thinking of above the line retiring. I'm like, oh, who won the championship after? And it was like it was the Shire Wolves.
it was a show.
So after losing the three-way, he then plays Alex Damon in a championship match. I don't remember how did Naps. I was thinking about this. I couldn't remember how did Napzok get a num. How did Napzok get to this match without a number one contender match, winning a number one contender match?
I think they just gave it to him. I
Oh,
I don't remember what the circumstances are, but Damon had just beaten Scrimshaw. Maybe Scrimshaw wasn't available, and so they went to Ken because Ken Bennett was also in that number one contender match.
yeah, the
I
Star
don't
Wars
remember what the
division.
exact circumstances are, but it was the 2018 Schmoedown Spectacular,
Yeah.
and yeah,
They
Alex
needed a Star
Damon
Wars
won.
match for Spectacular. They needed a Star Wars match for Spectacular. And as much
Yep.
as I love Scrimshaw, Knapsack's the bigger draw. Just because he was the former champion, he has the personality. He's a part of the faction system. Like Scrimshaw never was a part of the storyline the way Knapsack was. So I do understand giving it to him over Damon. Star Wars, early Star Wars is really like a three people division, which is
It really
weird.
was. It was really the four people. It was Whitwer, Scrimshaw, Damon, and Napzok. And then Whitwer retired, so it
Yeah.
became Damon, Scrimshaw, and Napzok. Um, the early days of the Star Wars division, I was actually really happy when the Star Wars division expanded and we got in the new blood of like the Sean Sullivans and the Adam Witts and the Thomas Harpers and Dim Malanta and Laura Kelly. because that division desperately needed it because there were only like a few contenders in that division.
It's crazy to think about because as someone who remembers more of the newer Schmoedown than the older Schmoedown, for all the people who remember that Star Wars tournament, people don't realize before that Star Wars quarantine tournament, the Star Wars division has always been like very bare in a lot of ways. And like I
Yeah.
think this is the season. Yeah, this is oh no, this is 2 seasons before the Star Wars tournament. But like the Star Wars division starts to brand out a little bit, but that Star Wars tournament, which we will now talk about now because that is Ken Napzok's next matchup, where he
His
played,
final match ever was in that 2020 Twitch Star Wars tournament.
which thematically is actually kind of like a good changing of the guard, if you will, in a way. Like thematically, like, okay, this is the end of the old Star Wars division and the head of the new one. And who better thematically for him to lose to Andres Cabrera, who I think symbolizes a lot the new Star Wars and what Star Wars became after a tournament, despite never winning a tournament.
Yeah. I remember them building this as the Master and the Padawan
Mm-hmm.
from Ace's days on Jedi Council with Napzok, and um, I really thought Ken would beat him. I honestly did because Ace was coming off that performance against Robert Parker earlier in the season. Even though that was IG, it was not a great performance. And then Ace came into that Star Wars tournament and he just started beating everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, like that's what made a part of what made Andres's ride to the championship, not winning the championship, but playing in the championship and winning that tournament so incredible because he was coming off a huge Robert Parker loss. And he was also coming off a loss a long time ago where we talked about that only a 3-person team match.
Yeah.
Andres was in that match. And so we haven't really seen Andres ever compete in the new Schmoedown in a way that was competitive, and he was going up against a legend. Even though Ken's record does not really say it, Ken's a legend within Schmoedown just because of how much of a personality he is. He is a champion, which you never get taken away that championship after you win it, even if you're the first one. Um, it really was something where it's like, I think if Andres won against someone else, it wouldn't have been as much. Like if he won his first match against Demolanta, even though that sounds crazy that it wouldn't be as much, at that point Demolanta was 0-2, and so on and so on. This was actually probably the best player that he could win to get to that, the start his run, if you will, and build up the hype.
Yeah.
And also, he was a part of the Star Wars teams match, which had a lot of controversy in. Which, by the way, small side note that I just realized by looking at this Schmoedown wiki. Which, by the way, whoever did the Schmoedown wiki, you truly have made this show
Yes.
possible.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
apparently, that match won Team Match of the Year in 2016.
The match between Ken and John Campia against Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sam Witwer is an absolutely incredible match.
It is.
If you have not seen that match, you need to go see that match because it's got a little bit of everything. It's got incredibly close competition. Ken and John lost in sudden death after the Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah.
cheating incident that we talked about on a previous episode, where Freddie wrote down one thing on the whiteboard, was not the first person to answer, realized that he had the wrong answer, and so he just said the right answer, even though that's not what he had written down on the
Yeah.
whiteboard. And I remember there being like a promo from Campia and Napzok after that about how they wanted a rematch. That rematch never happened. But that's an incredible match to look back on. And it's the only, I believe,
Only.
Schmoedown's team match that they ever did, as far
I'm
as Star Wars goes.
yes. Was there ever an IG teams match? I don't even think there was an IG teams match.
I don't think there was an IG teams match either. But there was, I think that was the only Star Wars teams match. I know everybody joked around about how we needed a Damon's versus Demolantes match eventually, but we
Yes.
never got that.
It's just I'm shocked it won that award just because of the cheating incident. Like if there's any other like cheating
But it
incident,
gave it such great drama.
that is true. And that's what makes sports different from like Schmoedown, if you will. Like I think if there was a cheating incident in like a basketball or football game, I think it would sour the game in a lot of ways. But with the Schmoedown, because of the wrestling flair and because of like the storyline that comes into it, I think you're right, it does propel it in that sense, and it was a great match.
Yeah, we should also mention that the Iron Man match against Whitwer was the 2017 match of the year. Those are the two Schmoedown Award wins that Ken got. He had a bunch of other nominations: Inner Geekdom Star Wars Player of the Year, Moment of the Year. He had 2 nominations for Moment of the Year in 2017. One for Whitwer beating
Honestly,
him
I'm
on the
shocked he
last
didn't
question.
win either of those.
Yeah, and one for Whitwer beating him on the last question, and one for when he betrayed Rachel. That was in the same year. That was an incredible year.
I'm gonna look up what one moment of the year right now.
Yeah. He was also nominated for Match of the Year that year for Nerds Watch versus Team Action, and for Rookie Team of the Year with Nerds Watch. He was also the Heel of the Year because he had the heel turn in the middle of all of that. And then to deal with what we're going to talk about here in a minute, he was also nominated for Manager of the Year in 2018 and 2019.
By the way, found out what won the award. Moment of the year was Andraco clearing everyone at the free for all.
That was a good moment.
Yeah, that was.
I'm okay with that winning.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too. Man, what a stacked year that was. 2017 was nice.
Yeah, 2017, one of my favorite years of the Schmoedown. Before we get into Ken's managerial career, let's hear from Justin about how you can help support the channel.
Hey guys, it's Justin, aka Hambone, just here to let you know a couple of things that we have going on with the channel. One, we have a Patreon. If you can and want to support us, you can do that. As little as $1. You can join the Discord. We also have a merch store where you can get some cool shirts, mugs, and stuff with all of our different shows and labels on there. Okay. And thank you for all of our supporters that have already been there with us.
That's patreon.com/LGR_network if you'd like to support.
So Ken was a manager, I believe 4 times in 4 different factions. The first one was the Lion's Den when he betrays Rachel and joins the Lion's Den. And I always believe that the Lion's Den...
He wasn't the manager of the Lion's Den, though. That was Dagnino.
But he didn't manage in the Lion's Den.
Ken's 4 managerial things were when he split off from the Lion's Den with Mark Donica and formed the Knights of Ken. That was very short lasting.
Well, that was his first solo faction. I'm pretty sure he managed some beat when Dagnino wasn't there.
He might have managed the Lion's Den when Dagnino wasn't there, but Dagnino was the manager of the Lion's Den.
Yeah. What I just meant is he got his managerial debut, if you will. Like his first like being a manager for a player in a match was in the Lion's Den.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
His first official manager faction was the Knights of Ken with Mark Donica. That was very short lived.
Yes.
Then he was, many people don't remember this, he and Grace were the managers of Corruption.
Yes.
Because he got put together with them in the Anarchy tournament, I believe, is how that came about. Then he was manager of the Burning Droogs.
Yes,
after,
that was the last one.
That was the last one. So those were the 4, yeah.
Yes.
He took over after Robert Meyer Burnett left.
Yes. So, what I think about Ken as a manager is he was one of those managers that was great on the mic. Maybe you could argue one of the best.
Fabulous.
Maybe arguably the best manager on the mic, period, on putting a promo, on hyping up his competitors. Truly, every time Ken was a manager, I always was excited to watch his competitors just because of how he built them up.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the strategy part of it, that wasn't his strong suit. And we're going to actually have an episode very soon based on a comment about the that we had on our YouTube videos. You put if you guys put in some things you want to talk about, we will get to them. But we had a comment asking about the evolution of managers and having a whole episode about the managers of the Schmoedown. And I think just to kind of preview that episode a bit, a lot of that is shown with Ken, because Ken is at the beginning and is a great promo guy. He's really great on the mic. He's great at building his competitors up and getting you hyped for the match. But as the Schmoedown went on, being a manager was more strategy based and be more really good at the game. And Ken was always good at the game, but I feel like once as I said, the Burning Droogs was his last manager, or as you said, the Burning Droogs was the last managerial appearance of Ken. And at that point, he was going up against Shannon Barney's and Winston Marshall's and just some
Boy
people who were
Jandros.
Coy Jandros as well. Just a lot of people who were like, oh, this is the new crop of managers that just taking this whole game to the new level. And Ken was more the old school versus the new school in that sense. And it wasn't enough just to hype up your competitors. Now you had to build almost like a team culture and a family vibe within your faction and know the strategies and be all in. And the Burning Drews never felt like that. And it's why it was so fitting when they came in last place. I believe either them or the usual suspects, but it was just clear that like it just I really do think that year when we had Coy and Winston and Shannon and even Dagnino to extent all managing was just maybe the greatest managerial performance we've seen in a year just period of just all these managers coming in and killing it both on the mic and the strategy and just a new wave of managers. But as a manager, Ken really knocks it out of the park, as I said, with the promo game, hyping up his competitors. Shame we never got to see more of the Knights of Ken.
It is a shame that we never got to see more of the Knights of Ken. I thought the pairing of him and Donica coming off of the Lion's Den was good. I don't know what happened there. Donica wasn't in the Schmoedown anymore.
I think what happened is the problem is that they literally started that storyline as soon as corruption started. So like
that's true.
It was like the timing was just terrible. It's like, hey Ken, here's your own faction. By the way, you're now managing my Kalinowski in corruption. Like it was like it would be one thing if they brought Donica into corruption, but then Donica just didn't. So there's no reason to continue the Knights of Ken narrative at all, especially because Kalinowski was the star.
Yeah.
So I think it was a bit of timing, but like, listen, corruption, like Ken in corruption is great. He's what helps build Mike and also make corruption in a way so easy to root against and so fun to root against. Him and Grace managing corruption, and also he helps build the rise of Shannon Barney because like Shannon taking corruption from him and Grace is a great storyline as well, and how she succeeds him as a manager.
Yeah, that's my favorite storyline that Ken was involved in as a manager is the rise of corruption, and then Shannon sort of coming in and being like, "You're not treating them right. You're not doing this right. You're not doing that right. Get out of here. I'll do it myself."
All right, and then the last thing we were going to talk about is because Ken really became, in the end, more of an announcer, and he had a very great announcing career. He was one of the consistent people who were announcing matches within the Schmoedown. And what I'll say about Ken as an announcer, what I really liked about him and what I thought he gave different from all the other announcers, it felt like he almost had a bit of an edge to him announcing. Like a lot of the times he'd be paired with Ellis, and Ellis was always super happy, if you will, and it was nice to have Ken at least be a little bit of the bad cop, if you will, but kind of like someone that's like not ultra positive or it just was a different feel. I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Ken as an announcer was great. He has that radio background, and that really played into the announcing thing. He was one of the more competent people that filled in on the desk. And when he was doing whether it was doing interviews or calling the match play by play with Ellis or Karloff or whoever it happened to be that day, he was really, really great at the announcing gig.
And I think like I don't know, it really did feel like he gave something different to the announcing than Harloff did, than Ellis did. It was his own voice, and I think he was also great with the improv at times. Like some of the improvisational moments needed to do announcing. He was just a natural at that. He's just very naturally funny. And so it was always a good time. And I think what's so hard about being a good announcer is you have to be good while not overstarring the competitors. Like a good announcer, it's tough because you have to, not be too boring and be entertaining enough, but you don't want to be the Ken Napzok and Mark Ellis show sometimes. You want the competitors to have the spotlight to be able to shine. For it to be their show, and you're just adding an extra layer to it, if you will. And that's, I think, such a hard act to balance. And I think Ken was one of the best to do it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite like catchphrase thing that Ken used to say? Because I'll tell you what mine is.
I wish I did, but I'll be honest. I was the type of person who was like, I sometimes tuned out the announcing. Like, announcing was my least favorite part of the game, not because it was bad or anything, but just because I love the gameplay and I love focusing on the competitors. So out of it, like, if there was a movie, a Schmoedown about the Schmoedown, I think I'd just get 0 for 0 on the announcing category. Like, that would be the slice on the wheel where I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go multiple choice on everything and I'll figure it out.
I used to love it when he would be introducing JTE and he'd call him famed Ecuadorian film reviewer Josh Tapia. That was my favorite. But yeah, Ken was such a vital part of the Schmoedown in every season, whether he was managing or whether he was playing or announcing matches. He was always there. He was always involved somehow. And he was really one of the like bright spots of the Schmoedown for me. Absolutely. I love Ken Napzok. I love his podcast, Force Center. I just think he's a very funny guy, and he's very intelligent, and he's very articulate, and that came across in all aspects of this game. Even if he didn't have the best record as a competitor, he was involved in some of the most memorable matches for me, or memorable moments for me in the Schmoedown.
I think what's great about doing an episode on a specific competitor is always doing one on someone you can't tell the history of the Schmoedown without. And I really truly believe you can't do that. Even in the last season where he didn't play a match, he was I think he was the ring announcer basically within that season. So no matter what, they always tried to get him involved. He always was just a great just someone who made the Schmoedown more entertaining, which is really what the Schmoedown was about, was entertainment. And he always added entertainment, no matter his record, no matter what was going on. He just knew how to add. And there's not, out of all the Schmoedown competitors that have come and gone, he's one of the few that gets consistently added and never took anything away from the Schmoedown, which I think is something to truly be said about him. And he's one of the legends for sure. He's one of the legends and the most influential competitors, and a joy to watch.
Absolutely. So thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. What are your favorite memories of Ken Napzok in the Schmoedown? Let us know in the comments below. And like Josh said, if you have any ideas for episodes you would like to see us do, leave those down in the comments as well. We do read all the comments and take your suggestions to heart. So Josh, where can the people find you?
They can find me here right on LGR. I'm going to be on the Nostalgia Crackdown. You might see me on an episode or two or more of the LGR Fantasy. You could see me hopefully winning the Fantasy League. You know, I'm 1-0. You got to keep the streak up. 1-0. I'm a bit nervous because I had a bad AJ Brown performance, but listen, you want to follow the Fantasy League for go on and support LGR, and you can see me either win or lose and cry. So either way, it's a win-win. LGR is great. I truly recommend the Patreon. It's got a great community and like truly is worth it. And listen, supporting me is just supporting LGR. So if you support LGR, that's great.
Speaking of the Fantasy Football League, Fantasy Football Roundup is back over on the LGRN, the Highlights channel. Ferris did the first episode with the surprise second highest point getter of week 1, Brandy Dagwan, who admittedly had no idea what she was doing, she says. So that's over on the Highlights channel. There'll be new episodes of that every week. I am also in the Fantasy League. You will never see me on the Fantasy Football Roundup show, though, because I have no idea how to talk about fantasy. I just know that this week is not going well for me so far. So we will see how it goes. But you can find me at Adelia Chambo on X or Twitter or whatever the app is called this week. You can find LGR on there as well at LGR_network. I am the co-host of Starting 11 over on the Highlights channel with our good buddy Snark, talking EPL soccer every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific and every Friday on this channel, 8 p.m. Pacific, with Ferris Muthana on the Open Table by the time this comes out, there will have been a special Saturday episode live from a special event. And that's all I'll say about that for now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And until next time, we're out.
It's for real.